Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for logging into this webinar. Excited to be with you guys today. We're going to be covering really a great topic. It's probably the #1 topic that we get asked about during our consulting and our coaching. We actually did not start our coaching and consulting company with this in mind, but this topic has become the central skill set that we're training managers and supervisors, and it has really become a pivotal point in developing great leadership. And it has to do primarily because your leadership is only as good as your followers, as good as your team. The way that you as a manager or you as a leader are going to be gauged is on how effective and how high performing of a team you have, and that is a direct result of how good you are at bringing on board a great team, and then how to develop that team and how to keep that team together for as long as possible. Managers have a really hard time with these 3 steps: how to find great talent, how to onboard great talent and get them to be high performing, and then how to keep them to be long-term high performers. And that we're going to be covering this in this webinar. So again, thank you for joining us. If you look on the screen, we're going to be dividing this up into 2 major parts: how not to onboard people, and then how to onboard people. Real simple. What is the process that doesn't work, and what is the process that works? Then part 2 is going to cover how to help new team members become great performers. In this section of part 2, we're going to cover what's called the secret sauce. This will be around the 35 minute portion of the webinar, so don't miss this. If you miss the secret sauce, you miss the whole thing. Actually, no. If you miss this great sauce, you get a tremendous amount of stuff, but you're not going to have the catalyst. You're not going to have the boost to understand how to make this last. And then we're also going to get into on the last part is the actual tools to use the secret sauce with, and then when to use them. We're also going to get into who should be the ones that use them, and there's what's called a handoff. So I'm really excited. Let's dive right into it. All right. So who am I? Why am I qualified to even do this? Okay. Well, my name is Maurice Velasquez, and again, thank you for joining us. I've been a manager, a coach, and a trainer for 25 plus years. Started my career in 1989, and I'm still going strong. Hopefully I'll stay strong for many years. 4 years of those, I was a manager of a global software company, and I oversaw 5 to 6 different programming teams in different locations. So I had to travel a lot, and I had to count on them to build their teams really well. During those years, I also had a lot of team members that reported to me internally. Great experience. Then 6 years, I started. After that, I ran my own software training company. I founded it. I was the president of it. And I worked with a lot of companies on how to develop high-performing team members in regards to their software usage. Then 4 years later, I was hired by one of my clients to come on board as a director of sales for the national company, which I did. And very similar to the first 4 years where I was working for a software company, this one was a national company across several states. I was the director of sales. We had a very large sales force. Started with about 150 team members in 60 offices throughout the different states. And I grew it to about 200, 225, 220 employees. We went from $220 million to $280 million within the 3-year span, opened up an additional 20 offices. So the experience that all this combined has given me a lot of knowledge and a lot of understanding how to onboard people, how to onboard teams. And then for the past 11, 12 years, I've been the president of Team Real World. And in that, we have helped over my span. I've hired about 200 plus people in my career. I've trained over 100 managers and supervisors on how to hire approximately 500 people. Unfortunately, I've seen too many people get dismissed or lose their jobs unnecessarily because of how they handled employees or how they were handled. Okay, I saw too many people lose their jobs because of how they were handled, and unfortunately, I saw too many managers likewise lose their jobs and deter their careers because they could not effectively build people and grow high-performing teams. This became a real big obstacle for me. I kept seeing it not only in my life and the people that we hired. We just could not hire enough people. And then in 2005, myself and several managers I was working with said that we had enough. It's enough is enough. We got to change things. We have to look at this differently. And so we put together this onboarding program, which this webinar is part of that. And that's what we're going to cover today is with the secret sauce. So make sure you stay until the end. If you have any questions during this webinar, make sure you use the GoToMeeting option, chat me, or you can text me at 225-505-2823. Our team is here ready to receive the questions and they'll feed them to me. I need to give you a disclaimer that a lot of this was very much an eye-opening experience when I read the book, The First 90 Days. So I encourage you to go read the first 90 days. If you can't read but just the first two chapters, then go read the first two chapters. That first chapter on how to understand the psychology of people when they come into teams is a game changer. Go get it. Michael Watkins does an incredible job. You'll hear a lot of that here, and then what we've done in the past 7-8 years to build around that and produce the tools and the concepts on how to apply this. All right, so how to do this. Let's dive into part one, how not to onboard people and how to onboard people. All right, so the first thing we have to look at and to determine how not to onboard is the problem. Adam Robinson in July 2018 in Inc. Magazine put a really good article out there, the top 3 reasons why new employees quit in the first 90 days. And how to prevent it. This right here, this slide does not capture your attention of why this is important, then everything else won't make any sense and you won't see why it's worth opening your eyes and seeing the world a little differently. Right? First of all, he points out that 1 in 4 employees quit during the first 90 days on the job. That is exactly what we saw. That is exactly what we suffered when I was doing this prior to 2005, using the wrong process and realized we've got to make a change. I've got to make a change. And we didn't know what to do. But the reality was we were seeing this. Then the statistics show even a much more eye-popping data is that it's up to 28% really of new employees quit within the first days on the job. And he encourages that it's critical to do everything in your power to keep new employees excited and engaged rather than risk losing top talent and needing to start the hiring process over and over again. Later in this webinar, I will show you the cost of that and why it is better for you to develop your people up front. It is better for you to develop low-performing employees that are already on your team before having to start the hiring process again. So you shouldn't have the luxury to give up on people and say, oh, well, you know what, I'll just find somebody else. No, that is not the right approach. All right, the other thing that he points out is that one of the major reasons is that we don't have a structured onboarding process. So it's a great point that he makes. The last thing any new employee really wants to do is show up on the first day only to find that the team is unprepared without any form of structured onboarding program. Okay, so the reality of it is that everybody, the vast majority of companies approach the onboarding of people in a very unprepared way. It's a mad dash in the last day or even afterwards where people come into their office, their computers aren't set up. They really have no idea what to do when they first make the past day or the first day. Their systems aren't set up, their computers not set up, their chairs, maybe they have a place to work, maybe it's busy. It's obviously unprepared. And then they start being told 3 or 4 different things by different people. It's a Keystone Cop approach. And that's the reality of it. Number 2, he points out that the expectations and goals are not clear. Let's read what that says there. The recent data found that 43% of employees who left the job within the first 90 days did so because the day-to-day job was not what they were expecting. So what they heard or what they think they heard before the onboarding, their first day on the job is quite different, or it became very different than what they were expecting. Now, it is not realistic for your job to always stay exactly the same. That's not realistic, and that's part of the onboarding process. You explain that, and you make sure that people aren't so they're not open to change to a certain degree. But you can't walk into a job where my responsibilities are A, B, C, and D, and then I end up really finding that my job is D, E, F, and G, and that the environment is totally different than what you told me, and the expectations are so odd and so off base. And this is where people just really get disengaged very fast. However, what I'll point out to you shortly is that most people don't leave. A lot of people leave, but most people don't leave, and they stay disengaged for the same reasons. All right, so let's look at number 3. The third reason is because training usually stops after the onboarding process. So we saw this in the way we were handling it, and I continue to see it in clients' approach, is that they hire folks and then they pretty much just send them on their own or leave them alone. There's very little follow-up. I'll show you what that looks like in a couple slides. But let's point out what he says is to succeed and stay motivated in their roles, employees need continuous training. I'm going to change a word there. Continuous training can also be continuous coaching, continuous mentoring. And this should go beyond any general onboarding sessions during the first week. I'm sorry to say that most companies don't have an organized onboarding session that lasts any more than perhaps one day, much less a week. But then after that, it just stops. It gets handed off to the managers, and the managers do not provide any type of ongoing coaching or mentoring. So these are the problems. This is the reality. This is what we're up against. So let's dive let's take a look at the notes from this article. The key things to start jotting down is that you have to be prepared. You have to receive them with a well-organized process. You have to clarify expectations way up front so that they're not surprised. And you have to provide mentoring to help them perform well and stay performing well. So make sure you jot those down. So you'll get copies of this presentation in a PDF afterwards at the end of the webinar. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do is be open-minded to this. I want you to really change your glasses, whether you have glasses or not, change the way you view things, because we are going to ask you to look at things a little differently, okay? But I'll tell you from our experience, these things that we're going to ask you are not only game changers, they really work. And they work long lasting if you're consistent to apply these and give it a chance for these things to really develop and nurture. All right, so onboarding, let's get into the way not to do it. The incorrect approach. I'm sorry to say that what I'm about to show you here is the way that most companies onboard. And this is the experience that most people have in corporate America, and we suffer from it. So this is what the process looks like. Here you have a series of months, 1 to 7 months, in which, of course, you're hoping that folks perform really well in the early part of these months, and they stay long lasting. That's our goal. On the left-hand side, we show their level of contribution, what they offer to the table, what they bring to the table to grow and become a high-performing individual. All right, so let's give ourselves here a 3-month approach. This is what we mostly do. We say, all right, we want somebody to perform by the end of the 3 months, and 3 months, that's what we call their testing period. And most companies have a 90-day period in which we can say whether they really are keepers or not. And there's a lot of legal ramifications around it. So what I'm asking you to do is don't worry about the legal ramifications. Change the way you look at this from a management approach. All right, so the approach basically says that we're going to set a goal for them to become high performance players. We're going to do them some initial training, whether it's a day, 2 days, perhaps a week. That's good. It should happen. And then we're going to expect them and motivate them to start performing, okay, and to really get with us for anything that we're available for them. And 2 months later, we'll hopefully they'll be growing so that by the end of the 3rd month, they have become good performers. Okay, the reality of this is that although we want them to stay high performing after that, 25, like we said, 28% of them quit during this process. And the reality also is Gallup, even to this day, shows that the remaining, all other employees stay disengaged at a 70% level. That means that they're only really engaged 30% of the time. So this process in America has not produced the high performing teams that we want. And the primary reasons for this is that this process places the responsibility for growth mostly on the employee and not on the company. I mean, be true to yourselves, be honest with yourselves. You know that we tend to hire people with this approach, and we want them to be high performance from the moment they come in, and then we just tell them, hey, you know how to do your job, and we say, here, we throw them in, and we expect them to be able to grow. Then the second reason why this process does not work is because it doesn't provide any support. It doesn't provide regular feedback, and it doesn't really set clear expectations of anyone following up on performance. It just doesn't provide that. And something else is that this onboarding process does not attract great candidates. The word about how you bring on candidates does not get out into the community, and you just become just like everybody else. But if you change your approach to make it more exciting, the word gets out and people actually will line up and be willing to last longer in your pipeline. And they'll call you back because they understand how powerful of a process you had, and it will attract more candidates. Also, this process does not produce high-performing teams. It just is. All statistics show 28% quit, and all of the remaining employees stay engaged only 30% of the time. All right, so how do we set up a good onboarding process? All right, so what I'm going to ask you to do is, again, to change the way you look at things and look at it in this way. We're going to still use the basic structure of what we have explained up to this point. They offer a certain level of contribution on the left. You have the 7 months down at the bottom. You're going to do some initial training. We'll cover a little later there. But other than that, from what I want to show you is very different. This is the approach we want you to have, is for you to recognize that there's 4 phases in this process. There's a phase where you do recruiting, the phase when the arrival happens and you do some initial training. Then the phase 3 is where you're going to develop them and you're going to mentor them. And then there's a later phase, which we'll cover in the back part of this webinar. But the first 3 phases are the ones we will have to pay most attention to. And today we're going to spend the vast majority of our time on phase 3. Why? Covey says that it's really good for you to start from the end backwards. So we're going to coach you and train you here on how to understand phase 3 so that you'll know how to set up phase 1 and phase 2. So in phase 3, what you do is you look at the expectations that you had previously when you were doing the previous approach, the previous process, and you say, no, you know what? I should be able to raise a higher standard of performance so that my team members aren't starting from a lower level of performance for 3 months. I want them to be higher performance team members after the 6 and 7 month, because I want them to grow after that. So the threshold that I want to get them to is very high. You should expect a lot from this process. You're going to expect a lot of them from this process, and you're going to expect a lot from your managers in this process. And that's where you have all 3 team members working together, the HR department or your HR person, your recruiting person, then your managers, and then the person themselves. All 3 players have to understand the demands and the disciplines of the process. All right, so something I want you to also to notice is that what's different is that whereas most people think that onboarding is when they first arrive, others think that onboarding means the first week. Some people think that onboarding is really the first 3 months. What we're saying is no, onboarding is the first 6 months. And if you can do what we're going to show you today in the first 6 months, then phase 4 becomes even more possible because they've learned how to do it themselves. And you've trained them to do it themselves to where they can grow in phase 4 and be much more self-developing performers. All right, so the next thing I'm going to ask you to change the way to think is, instead of expecting folks to come in contributing a whole lot, you need to view and understand that they're all team members. It doesn't matter how good they are on paper or how much experience they've had. Everybody comes in with a deficit. They come in below the contribution line, close to the bottom, because they don't have a lot to offer in regards to learning your culture, figuring things out, and learning what it means to be successful. They may know how to do their particular technical skills, but that's probably not what's going to make them suffer. What's going to make them suffer is your culture figuring you out, figuring your team out, the relationships with others, and then how is it that success is measured here, and how do I become part of this team? That's where people have to do a lot of climbing out of this hole, and they have to climb their way. And all statistics, and in that book, The First 90 Days, it points out that it takes any given employee, doesn't matter the profession, any given employee, new candidate, 3 months just to get out of that hole and start contributing. During that process, okay, the new red line I showed you there is most of us, we pretty much stop the development or the training of them at that point. But the new way I want you to look at this is that the blue line that just popped up on your screen, that shows that throughout the entire 3 months, there needs to be a weekly oversight and a weekly coaching by the managers. At this point, you're sitting going, wait a minute, a weekly? Are you serious? Yes, I'm serious. We'll talk about how to do that properly so that it doesn't kill your time and yet you can become effective. But if this doesn't happen, you're going to have the same results as the previous process. All right, so when you're providing this and you get them to the first 3 months, they're just now getting to where they're contributing, all right? Then you want to continue the same approach of weekly oversight and coaching for the next 3 months, so that by the time they get to between the 6th and 7th month, you have a high performance team member. And the way to do that is to secure that the manager is doing the regular oversight and coaching, or the frontline supervisor, whoever the frontline manager or the frontline supervisor or the frontline team leader is overseeing the performance of that team member. That person has to stay engaged on a regular basis, overseeing, providing coaching, providing management, and don't wait for there to be just a review at 3 months, and then we're going to do a performance review 6 months later. That does not work, okay? So I want to tell you that in order to do this, you have to have what's called a handoff. You have to understand that there is a handoff. So let's look at the first 3 phases. The handoff is when the HR person passes the baton to the manager in the onboarding process. Now, I've shown you the 3 phases, so let's go through them and show you where the handoff occurs. During phase 1, in the recruitment and hiring, HR is taking the lead, but the manager, of course, participates, okay? In phase 2, during the arrival, the training, and the orientation, HR continues taking the lead. They're the ones that organize, they coordinate, and they train, and the manager also provides training. They don't just appear a week later, okay? The manager has been involved during the phase 1 interview process. The manager is now involved in the training process, but the person, the team that should be spearheading this and quarterbacking this should be the HR department or the recruiters. You may not have an HR department, but you certainly should have somebody recruiting and then somebody being the manager. It is often a big problem if the manager is the one doing everything. That's why usually it breaks up, because the manager wants to do phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, and they don't have any collaborative colleagues to help them do phase 1 and phase 2 in the HR roles, and then let the manager play the manager during those phases. And then phase 3 is where the ongoing mentoring and coaching takes place. And this is where the manager takes the lead and where the manager provides the coaching, all right? And then where HR provides support. So, and then of course, the HR is also the one that holds the manager accountable to make sure that the weekly, bi-weekly, and monthly coaching is taking place. Now there you heard me say something a little different. You said you heard me say weekly, bi-weekly, and monthly. Yes, there's a time that you do this on a weekly basis, on a bi-weekly basis, and a monthly basis. I'll cover that in about 7 slides. So stay tuned, don't jump out, because otherwise you'll miss that. All right, so the way to understand this is the HR department is very heavily involved in phase 1, phase 2, and takes a secondary role in phase 3, whereas the manager is the opposite. They take a secondary role in phase 1 and 2. You notice that in phase 2, there's the handoffs beginning to happen, and in phase 3 is where the manager pretty much takes the lead and HR plays a supportive role. And the handoff happens right there between phase 2 and phase 3. It begins between 1 and 2, but certainly the handoff is made between 2 and 3. All right, so where does it fit? Let's go back and look at this the graph, and then let's ask ourselves, where does the handoff happen? The handoff happens right here at the end of 3 months. At the end of 3 months, the HR department, the recruiters, should be overseeing that the manager is providing the weekly oversight and coaching, but HR becomes almost like a big buddy, like a support system, making sure that the managers are doing the ongoing coaching and the ongoing training and the ongoing oversight. And then when you get to the 3rd month, you pretty much see HR disappear almost. They're only going to check in once a month or as needed. And then the managers take over and they make sure that they're the ones carrying the baton and they're the ones driving and doing the entirety of the oversight and coaching. So that's where the handoff happens. All right. So earlier I mentioned to you that there was a secret sauce. The secret sauce, in order to make this work, is the secret sauce of coaching. Okay, this falls apart if you don't understand the secret sauce. Everything can happen up to the point of phase 2, where we've developed good relationships with candidates to bring them on board, to hire them, we train them, and usually during the 1st month is when things begin to fall apart because the managers are not providing a weekly connection, a weekly touching, a weekly oversight, and a touch point. Not touching, a touch point of helping the new team member. And what's involved in that coaching? Well, you give them feedback, you give them direction, you coach and you train. And in this, there's an incredible amount of praise and recognition for their goal, for their attempts, for where they're doing really well, where they need improvement. And I know that right now, you're thinking, okay, but really, does it have to be on a regular basis? The answer is yes, y'all. I have to emphasize. It starts with a weekly oversight and then it peters down, but I'll cover that in a minute. But you have to see the importance of this. This is the onboarding. Onboarding falls apart if there's not this weekly oversight and coaching relationship by the manager, by the immediate supervisor, the immediate manager, or the immediate team member. So I hope I hope this is probably hitting you hard that, whoa, this is going to take a long time. And yes, it is, which is why I recognize that you're probably wrestling with this question. It says, I don't have enough time for this. And look, right now, correct, you don't have enough time because you're thinking of the original process, the old process. But what we'll show you is how to do it correctly where you will have time and you can do it on a regular basis and still be effective and it doesn't kill your workload. All right, but just commit yourself that if you tell yourself you don't have time, then you're going to be left with the old incorrect approach and you'll have the results that come with that. All right, so let's dive into what's the secret sauce. The secret sauce is of course, the ongoing coaching and mentoring, okay? But how? How do we do ongoing coaching and mentoring without taking so long and yet be effective? All right, so in order to cover that, I have to cover 2 things, 2 traps that you probably have fallen into, okay? So we'll cover these traps and then I'll show you how to do this. The first trap is that you probably are looking for candidates who you hope or they appear to require minimal training or no training. You basically want self-starters to tell you, hey, I got it. And you know what? They probably really do. But that's the trap. You think that that this is the only kind of person that you hire. And so I have had very close colleagues say, I only hire top performers. And I'm going, okay, but your top performers are still within the stats and statistics. And it's been our experience that it does not take long for high-performing individuals to become disengaged if they stay, or they leave because there's not a support system, okay? So let me show you what I mean by that. In this study done in 2015, to show what motivates people to perform, only 25% of new employees, of new candidates, of new team members are self-motivators. They, quote, don't need any oversight. The others, okay, those are the ones that look like this meme here, all right? The others that you hire, a whopping 55% are people that need for you to recognize them, to inspire them, and to train them. Then you have about 11% who, you know what, I just need for you to pay me. And there's about a 9% that is like, I don't know what motivates me. Well, the reality is this 75% that you see right here, if you take the same approach with these folks that you want to take with self-motivators because you don't want to train them or you don't want to spend the time coaching and mentoring, this is going to fall apart on you. They're going to leave or they're going to stay disengaged. So the 75% is what you have to worry about. And the trap of this, the reason why I call it a trap is because the trap is that you begin to treat the 75% like they're the 25% self-starters when they really are not. They will feel that you left them alone because you wanted them to be self-starters. So that's a self-fulfilling prophecy and a trap that you fall into. Now, what's addition to that is that there's another element to this trap is that when these self-starters, the 25%, start to not perform, and then you begin to hold them accountable, they will then say that it's because you never really provided ongoing training from the beginning and you weren't providing them ongoing support. You left them alone, and they're correct. So yeah, they start as self-performance, but when they start not performing, they're going to bring up the fact that you did not provide ongoing training and support from the beginning because you believed the self-motivators to stay self-motivators and to figure it out. That doesn't work, okay? The second trap I want to point out to you is that when by not regularly mentoring and coaching, you're creating disengagement. And that is costing your company a whole lot of money because what they see is that you really left them alone. Okay, there's no real accountability. And then they will begin to disengage because you're not touching bases with them on a regular basis about their performance. Okay, so they will either leave or they will stay, but they'll stay engaged at a much lower level. Like we said earlier, about 70% is disengagement. This costs you an incredible amount of money. How much? In August 2018, in a Gallup poll, in a Gallup article, they pointed out that it can cost you up to $100,000 to replace each person lost to the organization, whether they got fired, they left for a good reason, or you had to dismiss them, or they left for a bad reason. It doesn't matter. It can cost easily up to $100,000 to replace every single person every time that you lose an employee. So you can't really afford to say, oh, well, I'll just find somebody else. No, you got to really count the cost for this and recognize that you as a manager and as a management team, you have the ability, the power, the influence, and hopefully with this webinar, the know-how, the concept, the perspective, and the tools to change your approach and make it work better for you going forward. All right. So again, if you're still saying you don't have time, I'm going to encourage you to start thinking that you really don't have, that you don't have time not to do this correctly. Okay. You cannot afford not to coach a lot during the first 90 days. And I say 90 days because that leads to the 6 months. All right. And now you're going to ask us again, and you should ask us, all right, how do we do this? All right, let's dive in a little further. I'm going to show you an example of how it can be done and in a very high stressed environment and how this can be done. Here we have an example of Coach Steve Kerr of how he motivates his team. In this particular case with Steve Curry. All right, take a look at this. We'll just watch a little bit of this video.
I'm going to show you. That's your shooting tools. That's your plus minus. All right, so it's not always tied together. You're doing great stuff out there. The tempo is so different when you're out there. Everything you generate for us is so positive. It shows up here, not always there, so it always shows up here. You're doing great. Oh, carry on, my son. I would love to feel what you're feeling, man. Parts of my life. For me, if I went 5 for 6 and made 4 threes, that was about the best I ever did. Love it. One of the things I love about you is you're 2 for 11. No one understands shooting a 60-footer. Nobody in the league does that. You have so much confidence in yourself, and within games like this, you turn it around like that. That's awesome. Amazing. Wish I had your confidence.
All right. I'll tell you, when I grow up, I want to be Steve Carey. I think this is so wonderful. All right, so let's take a look at some things that he did. All right, he shows them their stats. Okay, he uses stats to praise and show where to improve. He uses casual conversation. What we're talking about here is not per se a big, long, drawn-out, 90-minute, monthly, weekly performance review. Get that out of your head. We can talk about that later. We have other workshops on how to deal with those, with the actual 6-month reviews and the 1-year reviews. Those we'll deal with later. What we're talking about here is a casual, formal, professional but yet friendly conversation that should happen on an ongoing basis. And these conversations are short moments. He does this on a regular basis, and he does it continually. Okay. Now you're going to ask, all right, how? Let's dive in further. All right. So when we look at the graph of how it all of the onboarding process, this is how you need to dissect it a little more and understand this. Is that during phase one of the process, when you are interviewing, when you are talking to them about recruiting them, that's where you communicate the expectations. That's when you tell them about the job. You show them the job description, and you actually show the actual metrics and the things that they will be successful at. Now, you do not show a lot of, you don't show any confidential information or any numbers that somebody could take away and bring to the competition or make public. You don't show those, but you do show what is expected in their job. You come up with about 6 or 7 clear expectations, and when you hire them and you bring them on board, the training that you do is tailored for them to meet those expectations. And then through the coaching process, you meet with them on a regular basis to have those 15, 20-minute conversations at most. Okay, if you can't do this within 10, 15 minutes, you're spending way too much time. And if those meetings do get long, then what you need to do is call your training department, or you call your trainers, or realize that I need to provide additional training to where it's now get back in the classroom or get back into showing them how to do things. But you should be able to do this type of ongoing mentoring and coaching in 10, 15, maximum 20-minute conversations on a regular basis. All right, so what you do is you take these expectations and you put them, we like to use a spreadsheet. As a matter of fact, we have a spreadsheet that you can download, and we'll send you the link to download it after the webinar, where we have a template on how we do this and how we have found it extremely, really powerful with all of our clients. So you set up your 7 expectations. Here we set up 7 examples of just very general, because you would have to make these expectations specific to each person's job. And what you're going to do is you're going to simply enter a 1, a 2, or a 3. All right. 1 means that you're at a beginner level. You got to push hard. 2 means that you're improving. You got to keep going. Or 3, you're doing an excellent job. You keep it up. All right. So the message that you're sending on a regular basis to the team member is to get out of red, get into yellow, and grow into green. All right. And the way to do that is you put these expectations into the spreadsheet that you would download from us. There they are listed there. And over at the top, you have every column is 1 week. And we color coded them to show the first month and the second month. So you meet with them the first week, and they're probably not going to score very high because they're beginners. So it's reasonable to start them at 1. Okay. Then they keep doing their work. The second week, you sit down with them and you review them, and now you show them where they're doing really well. They're making a lot of improvement in some areas, so you change it to 2. The cool thing about the spreadsheet is that when you enter 1, it automatically changes to red. When you press 2, it automatically changes to yellow. And when you change it to 3, you enter 3, it automatically turns to green. So again, download the spreadsheet from our website. Okay, email us. And we'll provide you the link after this webinar. All right, then you continue this process for the 3rd, for the 4th week. Your goal that you've communicated to them is that it's clear. Here's your expectations, and we want you after 4 weeks to be out of red in these areas. Now here I hear people say, well, what if we have new expectations? Well, it's a spreadsheet. You can add to it, and you can start them on that week. Just don't overwhelm them with their expectations, because then you're going to bury them and they're not going to grow because you are making their workload extremely too high. So you really should have no more. We tell our clients have no more than 10, maximum 12 top expectations, what determines them to be performing well. By the time you get to weeks 5, you should be seeing some greens. So you should be scoring them in greens. Then you keep going, and you should see that they're improving in greens. They're getting out of yellow. Now you notice item number 15, they went back to red, and this is very normal. People go in and out of skills, but at least you're monitoring it. You don't have to get frustrated. You know, you're coaching them. You pointed out to them that you're scoring down a 1. They might get upset with you. You might have to have a conversation, a tough, crucial conversation about, hey, come on, I really need you to focus on this. What you did last week did not work. I scored you 1. We talked about it. You continue to do it. I really need you to get out of this. We're about to get to the 8th week. I need you to be in green by the 8th week on all these. But they know that you know that they know that you're going to meet with them on a weekly basis. This doesn't get away from you. This is important. This is what's called accountability, coaching, and consistency. Then the goal is 7th and 8th week goes by, you see them getting out of yellow, out of red entirely. In this particular case, this example, which by the way was a real example, they didn't get out of yellow in everything, but they did get out of green. They did get out of red, but they're definitely in yellow and green. But I'm not going to stop. This is only the end of the 2nd month. We're going to continue this through month 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I assure you, as certain as it is throwing a ball up in the air and the laws of nature bring that thing down, we have seen it repeatedly. When you follow this, there's just this certain thing in nature that people realize that, wow, this works. This creates accountability, increases engagement, increases performance. Why? Because you're communicating and you're building a great relationship between the supervisor and the team member. Okay, so then how often do you do this? All right, you should do it on a weekly basis for the first 2 months if they're showing that they're getting out of red and into yellow and green by the end of 2 months, like the example we just showed you. In this particular case, if you notice on the screen, I would move this person now to bi-weekly. Why? Because they got out of red and they hit the 8th week with really good performance. Then I would go into the following month, from 2nd to the 3rd month, do it bi-weekly. At the end of 3 months, if they've gotten into green entirely, then you monitor it monthly. And if at any point you need to go back to bi-weekly or weekly, then you do it. And then you stay doing this monthly. You never stop doing this monthly. Then when you get to your 6-month, big 6-month evaluation, you've done 95% of the work. That 6-month evaluation becomes extremely normal. And it becomes just part of the ongoing conversation. When you get to the 1 year, you've already done 90% of the work anyway. You're not catching people by surprise, and your performance reviews becomes a conversation based on a relationship that you're having, rather than catching each other by surprise at the end of 6 months or 12 months, only to tell each other later what you should have been saying to them all along. So that's why this process works. Okay, so what are your takeaways? The takeaways is that it costs too much money to not do it. Okay, the second takeaway that I want to encourage you is just be real honest with yourself. You hire them. You have to develop them. You brought them up, you birthed them into your kingdom, you brought a team member. You can't just leave them alone. You have to develop them. Okay, you will find that if you do this, they will be willing if they see that you are willing. They will take out the time if you take out the time. If they realize it's this serious to you, it will become this serious to them. And fourthly, download the spreadsheet from our website. And don't forget, the secret sauce is coaching on a regular basis and mentoring. All right, we're near the end, so I need you to just kind of, where does everything else fit in that I told you I was going to cover later? So coming up, we're going to be doing another webinar number 2, in which we're going to cover the first phase. How do you recruit effectively? See, we need to cover phase 3 first, so that now you know that that's what we're building that's what they can expect. Now, how do I change and improve the recruiting process during phase 1? Then we'll also cover the arrival of phase 2. What should happen the first day, what should happen the first month, and what should happen the first 2 weeks. All right, webinar number 3 is when we're going to get into how to interview and how to identify top performing candidates through the interview process. All right, you're thinking, all right, man, but I want to move a little faster. I've got to get this under my belt. So therefore, what I'm telling you is you need to come and attend our 1-day onboarding boot camp. On that day, what we will do is we will show you the complete work. We'll provide you the whole enchilada, okay? We're going to cover phase 1, recruitment, phase 2, the arrival, phase 3, the mentoring, phase 4, performing, which we didn't touch on today, but you have to realize phase 4 is what you want to get everybody to, so that they all become self-producing, high-performance team members. We will give you all the forms. We'll give you all the steps. We have the manual completely laid out so you can tailor it, and we can tailor it with you. We have the interview questions, interview guidelines, and for this 1-day workshop, we're giving you guys that have attended this workshop a special 30% discount. So contact us, remind us, because we do a lot of these. Remind us the date and the time of when you attended the webinar. We'll have it all in record, and we'll give you the discount, 30% discount. It's normally $695. We'll give it to you for $485, and we'll add this special for you guys, that we will put you in workshops where we will not have 20, 30 people. We'll do it in smaller groups, and we will tailor that day's workshop to your needs, because we'll have a smaller group and we'll be able to tailor it to that team, to those attendees. You can't get this better price anywhere. It's fantastic. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. The webinar, the one-day boot camp is 30, 40 times more jam-packed because it provides you the whole process from beginning to end. All right, guys, thank you very much. I hope this was very helpful. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys got a whole lot of it. Do not forget the secret sauce. Email us. Email me at maurice@teamwearworld.com. Or text me, call me at 225-505-2823, and come into the workshop. We have one coming up next month. We'll send you a calendar of getting yourself into it, and we'll be offering those workshops once every 2 months, because we're spacing it out and we're filling them up. So come and join us on the workshops and let us help you out. Guys, again, thank you for joining us. Stay in touch.